So the preparation's getting funner and funner. And today we're going to talk about. Now, I got to watch this because I mentioned to Diane, I said I'm going to be called a misogynist after today. But we've been talking about these evil, wicked, mean, and nasty kings, and now we're going to talk today about some of the wicked women that were married to or the mothers of some of these wicked kings, and the scriptures are very plain that they were just as wicked. So we're going to talk about wicked women. I'm going to play you all a song, and I'm going to read you a poem today. So I'm looking forward to today's Bible study, and I'm not going to say that the song and the poem are closely related to what we're talking about, but let's put it this way: these may be the two largest rabbits I've ever chased. So, but I'm looking forward to it. I hope you all enjoy it. So, non-writing prophets, part 6, and now, as you all know, we are just now getting to the most evil, wicked, mean, and bad, and nasty king that that Israel ever had, and the evil, wicked, mean, and nasty wife of his. But there are some other ladies that were even worse than Jezebel. One in particular that we'll touch on today, but we don't really get to her for several more chapters. But I am going to touch on her and a few other women that influenced their husbands quite a bit. Well,
I get a disclaimer real quick.
I'm sorry.
You. I'm going to give you some cover. I'm going to give you some cover. Can I do that?
Oh, yes, please.
I will say, if you think that Skip is callous in his approach to some of these rabbits that he's going to be talking about today, believe me when I tell you that Skip is always conscious of offending anyone. So he did call me, and he was concerned. He's like, well, if I go down this direction because of what the scripture says, is this going to cause an issue? And the fact is when we've been doing these studies, and I'm going to share with everybody what I told Skip. I look at what he's presenting here, and I always look at the modern application of what he's talking about, because a lot of the issues that plagued ancient Israel in terms of their descent into wickedness, you could find a lot of parallels in our society today. And so I was telling Skip, I says, I wouldn't be offended at any of this, because you're not bashing the ladies or the wives and all these women, but when a society goes corrupt and everything like that, there's always good applications to what's happening now, as warnings that God gives us in the scripture what happened back then. So he's not going to be talking about what he's going to be talking about for the sake of offending everybody. He is sensitive to it, so he's not callous, and I thought I'd give him a little cover for that regard. He does have a very big heart for everybody.
Well, boy, I appreciate that. Diane, did you hear that?
No.
Yes, I did hear that. I couldn't get my iPad unmuted.
Okay, now, so one of the things I've noticed over the last few studies is how some of these kings' wives seem to be overly involved in their husbands' rulings. And I talked to Michael, I talked to John Reedy, and John made a comment that if you're just reading through Kings, you read some of this stuff, but it doesn't register. One of the reasons that I found it doesn't register, in my opinion, is that some of the names of these women, they sound like guys. The names are all similar. So anyway, with that as an introduction, I'm going to start with Solomon. I want to go back. And the scripture says this, as you all well know, that King Solomon loved many strange women. Now, there's two ways to look at that, but I'm not going into that. And he married, Pharaoh and women from Moab and Ammon and Edom and Zidonia and Hittites and so on. But I think we all understand those were probably more political than due to a love affair. I mean, can you imagine him dating 700 women? You can't live long enough to date 700 women or 700 men. I say that in jest, but wow, it would be difficult. So these were probably mostly political things, as we've talked about before. Their father's kingdoms, these women that Solomon married, their father's kingdoms were important allies and would have been very important enemies if Solomon had not bound himself to the girls. So it goes on and it says of the nations concerning which the Lord, we all know that God said, stay away from those people. And he said, to wipe some of them out and so on. But Solomon, he didn't listen. Solomon clave to these in love. Now that says in love. So apparently, he did love them, but I don't know how in the world he dated 700 women. But anyway, in verse 4, it says, for it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other gods. Now, I submit that while that's true, it didn't just happen when he was old. Solomon died at age 60. That's not very old. Now, granted, back then it may have been older because of the time and all that kind of stuff. But in 1 Kings 11, it says that he did evil in the sight of Yahweh. And he didn't go fully after Yahweh as did David, his father. And then in verse 7, it talks about this is when he starts getting in trouble. He built a high place for Shemash, the abomination of Moab. And he built it on a hill. And I can see an Asherah pole, I think is the correct way to put that. And for Molech, based on my little understanding of these false gods, these Elohim, that Molech was maybe the worst one because that was where they threw their babies into the fire. And then he was involved in the abomination of the children of Adam. And then it says, likewise, he did for all of his strange wives. So he had 700 wives, and he's letting them worship the gods of their lands. And so he's probably, we've got one example of him building a high place. Well, hey, Solomon, you built one for Martha over there. Why aren't you building one for me? Okay, I'll build one for you. And then the next wife comes in. Wait a minute, you built those two. I want one too. So I can just see these places of worship of false gods all over the place. And a lot of them were there to begin with. They were there when Israel came into Canaan. So it's not just that this stuff happened when Solomon was old. It went on and on and on during his rulership. Now, here's my first rabbit for the day. And this is from the complete Bible library commentary. This isn't the rabbit part, but I'm going to read you all a poem in just a minute. The attempt made by some to gloss over Solomon's apostasy as a sign of a large-hearted tolerance is an astonishing misreading of history. Now, this is according to the complete Bible library commentary. There should always be tolerance for harmless divergences of opinion, though it is only a growth of modern days. But tolerance for iniquity is wrong to holiness. And the worship of these demons adored as deities, and Mark covered this a couple of weeks ago. Some of it did a synopsis of what he had done before. And by the way, we were talking about our website a while ago. On our website is a program that Mark did about the Elohim and the gods of these other countries. But it says the worship of these demons, adored as deities, was stained with the worst passions which degrade human nature. They were themselves the personification of perverted instinct. Now, I'm going to read a poem that was written by John Milton in Paradise Lost. And I know you all may be going, what? Well, just listen to this poem. First, Moloch, horrid king, besmeared with blood of human sacrifice and parents' tears. Next, Chemosh, the obscene dread of Moab's sons, Pure his other name, when he enticed Israel in Sittim on their march from Nile to do him wanton rites, which cost them woe. Yet thence his lustful orgies he enlarged, even to that hill of scandal by the grove of Molech, homicide. Lust, hard by hate, till good Joash drove them thence to hell. If you remember, Joash is the one that they found the book of the law, and he started the holy days again. But anyway, till good Joash drove them thence to hell. With these in troop came Astaroth, whom the Phoenicians call Astarte, queen of heaven, with crescent horns. To those bright imaged nightly by the moon, Sidonian virgins paid their vows and songs. In Sion also, not unsung, where stood her temple on the offensive mountain, built by that uxorious king, whose heart, though large, beguiled by fair idolatresses, fell to idols foul. And matter of fact, I'm sorry, I had it on here. Y'all could have read along with me. But Milton was pretty familiar with what was going on in Israel. I mean, this is kind of a history of lots of the different little g gods, little Elohim, that Israel dealt with, and it wasn't just Israel. I mean, he's talking. He went all the way back to Moses.
What was the name of the poem?
It's written. It's from Paradise Lost by John Milton, but I don't know.
Okay, thanks. That's fine.
Yeah, and I'm surprised that it was in there. It's from Paradise Lost, and the title of the book tells you, a little bit about it. Okay, so now we are finally, I'm sure some of you all are thinking finally, we are finally about to run across probably the worst king that the nation of Israel ever had. Now remember, we're split. We've got Judah in the south, and we've got Israel in the north. In the north are the 10 tribes, and that's where most of this worship of these demons, Elohim, that are going on up here, false idols, little g gods. And as we go through the scriptures concerning Ahab and Elijah, we're going to see how much influence Jezebel had over Ahab. And I'm going to make a statement right now, and y'all agree, disagree if you want to, but I think Ahab was a wimp. I think Jezebel was the power behind the throne. And as we get into this, we're going to see how much influence Jezebel had over Ahab. So let's go back again to Solomon's mother and father. You know who that is, David and Bathsheba. And we're gonna find that it wasn't just the wives that created problems for Israel. There are some grandmothers that caused a lot of trouble. So let's go back and start with Bathsheba. while it was, there's no way we can doubt that it was a part of God's plan that Solomon be the king. But like happened with, back with the patriarchs, there were some tricks that were used to get what you want. And so Bathsheba got with Nathan, and they came up with a plan to skip over the quote rightly unquote descendant of David who was to be king, and they talked David into appointing, I guess is the right word, Solomon, to the point where they lied to him. They made up a story. In in 1 Kings 11, it says, Nathan spoke to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, and said, hey, look, David's going to put Adonijah in as the king. And, that's the sequence. And David, I think he means here, the writer means David doesn't really know. He's older. He's not as sharp as he once was. He says, this is what Nathan says. So now come, let me show you how to do this and how to put Solomon on the throne. I want you to go to King David and basically lie to him and said, have you not, my lord, O king, sworn to me, saying, surely Solomon, your son, will be king after me, and he'll sit on my throne? Why then has Adonijah become king? One of the things, when Saul was king, so was David. But David didn't push, I said Saul. When Saul was king, so was David. And so the same thing's going on. Adonijah is now acting like he's the king because he's the next in line. And he says, behold, while you're still there speaking with the king, with Adonijah, I'm going to come and confirm your words. Okay, so David listened, and Solomon became the king of Israel. It was the United Kingdom then, if you remember. And this is God's plan, but sometimes, and we've read many times in the Bible where God will tell somebody, I'm going to do something, and they say, yeah, okay, yeah, but you need a little bit of help. You need me to work this thing out for you. And you can think back on 2 or 3 times that happened, and it kind of happened here with Solomon. So Solomon dies, and Rehoboam, his son, reigned in Judah. And Rehoboam was the oldest one. He was supposed to be the one. He was 41 when he began to reign. And it says that after 17 years, it mentions that his mother was an Ammonite. Well, here we go. Naamah worshipped the gods of Ammon. And I can't remember specifically who that is. I've probably got it in my notes somewhere. But so Solomon, married these 700 women, and they all had their own pagan gods. And so Rehoboam's mother was an Ammonite. All right. So then, okay, let me say this. Each of us, well, there are exceptions, of course, but most of us have had mothers, and most of us have had fathers. And we're taught by our mothers and our fathers. And especially back then, most of the influence for a child's upbringing would have been through the mother. Now they if they were kings and queens, they had nannies or whatever they called them back then. But the mother still had a lot of influence over their sons and daughters. So when Rehoboam died, Asa came along. Now, Asa was a good king. He wasn't 100% good, nor are any of us, but Asa was a pretty good king. He did that which was right in the eyes of David. He took away the Sodomites out of the land. You remember the male prostitutes. He took them out of the land and removed the idols that his father had made. Now, the key there is he removed the idols his father had made. There were still a whole bunch of idols in Canaan that had been there for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. And then here's where his mother is mentioned, and he knows what his mother taught him, and he knows it was wrong. And she tried to teach him to worship these pagan gods, and he didn't do it. And he even went to the point where removing her from being what they call the queen mother, it says removed her from being queen, but she was the queen mother because she made an idol in a grove. And Asa destroyed her idol and burned it by the brook Kidron. So here's a mother who is doing everything she can to lead her son down the wrong path. But Asa withstood her and destroyed her idol in her grove, and so on. Okay? Now, we're still in Judah here. We haven't talked about any of the people up in Israel yet. It says the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that tells you that we're in the south. The inhabitants of Jerusalem made Ahaziah, his younger son, king in his place. And I'm sorry, I haven't listed everybody, so I'm not sure which king it was. But anyway, for the band of men who came with the Arabs to the camp had slain all the older sons. So this is the only one left. So Ahaziah, the son of Joram. Now, it's sometimes spelled Joram, and it's sometimes Jehoram. This is in Second Chronicles, and the writer of Second Chronicles spelled it with an H, and not just Joram. So Jehoram, king of Judah, began to reign. Now, that was in Judah, and then Ahaziah was 22 old when he became king. I don't know if these authors tried to confuse me or what, but they've done a really good job. But anyway, it says he reigned for 1 year in Jerusalem, and I want you to remember this name. His mother's name was Athaliah, the granddaughter of Omri. He, the king, walked in the ways of the house of Ahab. Why? Because his mother was his counselor to do wickedly. Now, let's go back to this granddaughter of Omri. Omri was Ahab's dad. So we have the daughter of Ahab who has gone to the south and has married one of the kings of Judah. Now, we're going to get into this a lot later on, and I'm just going to touch on it today. But just think of the damage that this woman is doing in Judah, not in Israel where she was from, but in Judah. And then 2 Kings 11:1, it talks about her a little bit. All right, so her son, and I've taken these out of context because we're going to cover them later on, but her son died or was killed, and I can't remember which. And so then we have 2 Kings 11:1. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, you know what she did? She arose and destroyed David's descendants. Now, what did God promise to David? That he would always have a seed on the throne of Israel. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, the sister of Ahaziah, who was the king before, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him. So she saved one of David's descendants because this mother of Ahaziah, who was the daughter of Ahab, had all the rest of them killed. And it says in verse 3, he was hid in the house of the Lord for 6 years. And look who reigned. The woman, Athaliah, reigned over Judah. So Judah had a female king for 6 years, at least. Now I want to stop there. I want some comments. This was new to me. I might have heard this 30, 40 years ago, but I had certainly forgotten it. Has anybody ever heard of this female king or call her a queen, I guess, of Judah? I had not.
Never me.
I'd never heard of it. Anybody else?
Oh, I've heard of it, but it'd make a good movie, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. It sure would. Yeah, this was just all brand new to me. I mean, I was just, let's say, what do they call it when you speak in tongues? I was slain in the spirit. I wasn't speaking.
You were flabbergasted.
Yeah, I was flabbergasted. I just, and there's a lot more later on when we get to this point. And the reason I mention it now is that I'm trying to make a point that a lot of the reason that some of these kings were bad because of mom. Mom was a pagan. Look at all of the queens, if you will, of Judah that were married to Solomon, and what they brought into Judah. Now, fortunately, and I'm betting because of the Levitical priesthood, I'm betting that they were able to counter the teachings of a lot of these mothers, because obviously Judah had good king, good king, good king, bad king, good king, bad king, good king, good king, bad king. That's the way it worked with Judah. Where in Israel, and we'll get into that in a minute. In Israel, it was bad king, bad king, bad king, and there might have been a good king in there somewhere, but I can't remember who it was. But I thought it was important to go through some of these women that were obviously causing trouble, especially in the north. So now in 2 Kings 8:16, this is a little more. As a matter of fact, this explains some of what I just talked about. In the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, okay, so he's talking about the king of the north, Jehoshaphat became the king of Judah. And Joram, or Jehoram, depending on which pronunciation you want, the son of Jehoshaphat became king. He became king of the south. He was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 8 years. But he walked in the way of the kings of Israel. Now, what's another way to say that? He walked in the way of Jeroboam, who sinned and taught Israel to sin. So this is a king of Judah who is evil, and he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, just as the house of Ahab had done. Why? for the daughter of Ahab became his wife. That's the woman I was talking about just a minute ago. And he did evil in the sight of Yahweh. Okay, so this is a king in Judah. Okay, so now we're going to move up north. Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, became king over Israel in Samaria. And now remember, I think it was Omri that had built the palace in the city of Samaria, in Samaria. So he became king over Israel in the 17th year that Jehoshaphat was the king of Judah. It says he reigned 2 years over Israel, and he did evil in the sight of Yahweh, and walked in the way of his father, and in the way of his mother, and in the way of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. I mean, the writers are really nailing this guy down. He walked in the way of Jeroboam, he walked in the way of his worthless father, and he walked in the way of his worthless mother. Okay, next. 42 years old was Ahaziah when he began to reign. Okay. He reigned 1 year in Jerusalem, and his mother's name also was Athaliah, the daughter of Omri. Except this is the granddaughter. And if I'm reading this right, and maybe I'm wrong here, it looks like maybe she's got influence over what's going on in Israel and what's going on in Judah. It says he walked in the way of the house of Ahab. Why? For his mother was his counselor to do wickedly. Is that the one I read a while ago? It is. I've already read that one. Sorry, I'm being redundant.
So the New King James says that Athaliah was the granddaughter of Omri, but the marginal reference says, let's see, daughter.
Right.
So
granddaughter is right, and granddaughter would be the wife of Ahab. Omri's, I'm sorry, would be a sister of Ahab, wouldn't it? She was the daughter of Omri, or the granddaughter of Omri. If she's the granddaughter of Omri, she would be of the same, what am I trying to say? She'd be Ahab's age, right? Isn't that right?
Omri was Ahab's father,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So the granddaughter would skip Ahab's generation, and you end up with Amaziah and Joram. And we need a family tree and a genealogist.
You're right. It's a generation after Ahab, isn't it?
I would think so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, like I said,
But yeah, you're going to go back and forth on all of this to try to get all of that. It's
I know it.
kind of hard with prose.
Yeah, and
So I was just
I'm
looking
sorry.
at timeline thingies. So.
Well, I still say that whoever wrote this had me in mind so that they could confuse me with all of these generations. And, like you say, we need a family tree. Okay, but the point is, and we think this is the generation after Ahab, but the point is, his mother was his counselor to do wickedly. And again, I don't want to be considered a misogynist. I'm just reading the scriptures, and I thank Michael for his effort to save me. Okay, and in Proverbs, now this is interesting. I took this completely out of context. I took the half of this, the Proverbs 31 off, but I thought this was interesting. The words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him, what my son, and what the son of my womb, and what the son of my vows. And verse 3 is it. Give not your strength to women, nor thy ways to that which destroys kings. I think this is looking back at some of these mothers of kings and wives of kings that, and they did destroy kings. Okay. So those are a
So
few.
we shouldn't fall for modern woke stuff that says all men are bad no matter what they do, and all women you have to believe them no matter what.
Yeah, true. Okay, so anyway, I thought all of that was very interesting because we always look at these evil kings. I say we always. I'm speaking from personal experience. I always looked at all of the evil kings, but I never really looked at. I'm going to call it the power behind the throne. Some of these wives were pagan. All of Solomon's were. Or just about all of them. But anyway, okay. So,
Well,
yeah,
the thoughts. Well, a comment and a thought based on something you said a little while ago. One thing you can find from history is that matriarchal societies, or societies that are governed by, or where the women call the shots, are usually all tyrannies of one sort or another. Much of the nations of Africa are matriarchal societies and whatnot. When a patriarchal society devolves into a matriarchal society, you certainly have tyranny. So that's an historical thing you could look into and see for yourself. The other thing is, you had said a while ago that that it was God's plan that Solomon, be put on the throne. When you're reading all this and you look at the sin of David with Bathsheba, was it really God's plan from then, or is God making do with what man has done to it was never God's intention from the beginning. It's kind of falls in that whole situation with divorce. It was never God's intention that men should divorce their wives, but because of the hardness of their hearts, God permitted Moses to give a writ of divorce. Would it not be similar in a situation here with David and Bathsheba that these things happen, that it wasn't necessarily God's initial intention for Solomon to be on the throne, but because of David's sin? And that's where the genesis of where you could see where all of this kind of was started to go south, was literally at the sin with David and Bathsheba. There's consequences that came as a result of it. At least that's how I'm picking up on it. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that's fine. I was out on a limb when I said it was God's plan. In theory, everything is God's plan, but you're right. Sometimes I'm quite sure that God works out the screw ups of what man has done or what a woman has done or whatever. So yeah, no, I don't have a problem with that at all. I think you're right, and or it could have been God's plan. It's just one of those we don't know things. Okay, so these are a few examples of how wives and mothers affected their sons and their husbands' rules, and we will be discussing some of these later on. I mean, I don't know how many of these studies we're still going to be in the non-writing prophets. I can see at least two more, if not more. But I think you all know me well enough. I like to cover as much as we can, and I like to go verse by verse. And that may drive some of you all crazy, but I would never have known about this woman queen if I had just read through First Kings 18 or 20 and Proverbs. And Chronicles 22. I think at least I pick up a whole lot more. Okay, now let's jump back to Omri. Omri is the father of Ahab, and he was terrible. He was it says that he was in 1 Kings 16, it says he did evil and acted more wickedly than all that were before him. For he walked in the way of Jeroboam, okay? And in his sins, we've read this and read this and read worse, and provoked Yahweh Elohim of Israel with their idols. And then here's now the rest of the acts of Omri, and we've already covered a lot of that, which he did in his might and so on. And it says, Omri slept with his fathers and was buried in Samaria, and Ahab reigned. Okay, so here we go. Worst king, worst of the worst of the worst of the worst, but he is confronted by the best of the best of the best of the best of the non-writing prophets. Maybe the best of all prophets. He was the archetype of all of the prophets. So Omri was one in a long line of bad leaders. Jeroboam, Nadab, Baasha, Elah, and Zimri. But Omri was worse than all of them. He reigned over Israel for about 11 years, and he ended a period of 57 years of kings. That's these guys, Jeroboam, Nadab, Baasha, Elah, and Zimri. And him, 57 years of kings who had walked in the way of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and his sins, which he made Israel to sin, provoking the Lord God, Yahweh Elohim of Israel with their idols. A whole line of these guys. So by now, of course, this shows how patient God is, but by now God's had it with these guys. He'd run a prophet in every once in a while and make a comment and tell them this is going to happen, that's going to happen, and your descendants are going to be killed, and so on. But we've got a new prophet coming. We've got a new type of prophet coming. So we come to 874-ish BC, the first year of Ahab's reign. And Ahab was more wicked than any of those 6 kings that reigned before him. And it says it very plainly. Ahab, the son of Omri, became king in the 38th year of Asa. And that's one thing these writers do. They kind of tell us what's not necessarily what's going on in the south or the north, depending on which one they're talking about. But they tell us how long, for instance, Asa's been reigning for 38 years in the south, and Asa was a good king. So Ahab, the son of Omri, reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years. And I looked at the lineage here, and Asa and Ahab reigned along with each other for, I think, 17 years, I think is the number I came up with. Ahab did evil in the sight of Yahweh more than all of those I just named a minute ago. And then, a scripture that really is important. It came about as though it had been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sin. He married Jezebel. And he and she went to serve Baal and worshiped him. So he erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, right where the palace was, headquarters of Israel. They put a pagan altar in there. And then it says Ahab also made the Asherah. Thus did Ahab more to provoke Yahweh, Elohim of Israel, than all the kings. And so guess what? God's had it. I'm sending somebody, Ahab, that you're going to lose sleep over. and he's going to occupy your mind. I don't know if anybody's ever told you this, but if you're really, really angry at somebody and you think about it all the time, you're giving them, authority over your thoughts. And I can see that happens with Ahab. I mean, you can imagine once he meets Elijah, Ahab doesn't get any more rest, really, till the day he dies. All right, so in 1 Kings 17:1, and I've cut part of this out. We'll come back and do the full verse in a minute. Now Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the settlers of Gilead, said to Ahab. Okay, now, very abruptly, I mean, Elijah just comes in out of nowhere. We don't know if Ahab knew who he was. We don't know if he had a reputation. All we know is all of a sudden he bursts on the scene out of nowhere. Nothing is said about his father and mother. We have no idea who his parents were. He's simply Elijah the Tishbite of Gilead. The name Elijah, or its fuller Hebrew form, Elihu, means Yahweh is my God. And Yahweh was his God. Other than being a man of God, we don't know anything at all about him. Who he was, other than he's a man of God. And no one knows for sure, and I'm going to go out on a little limb here. It's not a big limb, it's a little limb. That he may have been, oh no, don't tell me. All right. You know what? I have another map down here. Let me see if it's any better. Nope. Okay. I don't know what's wrong with this map. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go get.
It's too low res.
It's too low res.
Yeah, you blew it up. You took a very small, tiny thumbnail and blew it up. That's what that mapped. You got to get a higher resolution. Whenever you're doing graphics, Skip, you want to try to get something at least 150 to 300 DPI dots per inch.
Let me see if this will help here. Nope.
No, you don't read it.
Okay. I do have the original one though over here. Let me go. Well, it's just not worth it. Let me bring this one back.
Well, Skip, we can see the blobs of color if you want to use your cursor to point out something.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
We can kind of get a general idea. We just can't read any of the names that are on the map.
It's funny. After doing this for however many years, this is the first time this has really been this bad. But okay, I know the map. So here we go. Right here is Samaria. Okay. Right here is Tishbe. Now, I may be transliterizing here, but Tishbe sounds like Tishbite. So this could be where Elijah's from. We don't know. I'm not saying that he is, but it's interesting. It's not too far from Samaria. Now, I've chased a lot of monkeys over the years.
So I have an input on that.
Okay.
I would say that they're definitely related. Tishbe is the little village, and a Tishbite is a person from that village. Just like if you were from Bethlehem, if you were from Bethlehem, you would be a Bethlehemite.
Yep.
Or if you're from Nazareth, then you would be a Nazarethite, not a Nazarite. That's a different term. But anyway, my conclusion would be that a Tishbite is from the village of Tishbe.
And that would definitely coincide with, the way the ancients would reference one another. And in America, we can't do that because, people from Wisconsin, we call them cheddar heads. So, you can't really delineate, you figure out exactly where they're from by the way that we call each other where they're from. I'm a Flatlander. I'm from, or Chi-Town. Well, that's kind of like Chicago, but yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, just a little humor there. That's it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I just didn't want to go so far out on that limb, but since I've got you and Michael out there on that limb with me, I'm with you. I think Elijah the Tishbite is from Tisha or Tishba. Tishbe. I think it's just it's too close. Geographically, it's close to Samaria. So anyway, I hope that my map that I'm going to show later, and I don't know if it's today or next week because I've already started on next week's, but that shows where all Elijah was told to go after during the drought. And I don't think I don't know if I'm getting into that or not, but anyway, okay. Now I'm about to chase the strangest rabbit I've ever chased, and this doesn't really have anything to do with our Bible study. It's just it brought one of my past things for even before I met Diane to mind. Oops, let me back up. Elijah was from Tishbe, which is in Gilead. Okay. And Gilead is a mountainous region, and it's located in modern day Georgia. I mean, it's right. Oh, okay. Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the settlers of Gilead, said to Ahab. Now I want to talk about Gilead. Gilead is right here, and Tishbe is right there, and that's where Elijah's from, which I think supports what Mark said a minute ago, that he most likely is a Tishbite. But it's located in modern day Jordan, east of the Jordan River, and it extends south from Lake Gennesaret in the north to the north end of the Dead Sea in the south. Now you can't see it real well on the map, but you can see the blue, and that's the Dead Sea. So on the north of that, up to where the you can see where it says Gilead. Anyway, that's where he's from. There's 4 mountain peaks in Gilead that are mentioned in the Bible: Mount Abarim, Mount Pisgah, Mount Nebo, and Mount Peor. The area is known for a healing balm, and there are 3 or 4 scriptures talking about this balm in the Bible. And any of you who have sung in choirs know where I'm going. But this balm is made from liquid rosin from the local trees in Gilead, and due to the access of these medicinal ingredients, many physicians lived in Gilead because they could get this balm, this soothing salve here, and it wasn't available anywhere else. And so in Jeremiah 8:22, and I've got that scripture, so I'll save that. He talks about it, and so on. Now, there's a song called "There Is a Balm in Gilead" that I will play after I show you these scriptures. I got that. Then they sat down to the meal. As they raised their eyes, behold, a caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead. Then Jeremiah says, is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no soothing, nothing, nothing good, nothing to help? Is there no physician there? Why then has not the health of the daughter of my people been restored? And again, Jeremiah says, go up to Gilead and get some of the balm, O virgin daughter of Egypt. So, this balm in Gilead is not only a medicinal salve, it's also a metaphor for healing of the nation. Go up to Gilead and obtain balm, O virgin daughter of Egypt. Who's the virgin daughter of Egypt? That'd be Israel. In vain have you multiplied remedies. There's no healing for you. You've gone after these other gods. They're not going to help you. At least that's the way I'm looking at that scripture. So I'm not trying to connect any of this to Elijah. It brought back some memories of when I used to sing in choirs, and I absolutely loved it. And in Judges 10, it says, the anger of Yahweh was hot against Israel. He sold them into the hands of the Philistines and into the hands of the children of Ammon. And that year they vexed and oppressed the children of Israel. For 18 years, all the children of Israel that were on the other side of the Jordan in the land of the Amorites, which is in Gilead. Okay? So Tishbe is in Gilead. Elijah grew up in Gilead. And there's another horrible map, but here's the song.
So let's say you have to read an incredibly long email from your boss that you have to finish before the big meeting starts in
without an ad.
There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Sometimes I feel discouraged and think my work's in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. If you cannot preach like Peter, if you cannot pray like Paul, you can tell the love of Jesus and say he died for all. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Don't ever feel discouraged, for Jesus is your friend. And if you lack for knowledge, he'll never refuse to lend. There is a balm a sin-sick soul.
So anyway, I always love that song, and it's, you know, it can be metaphorical, and it's literal. There was a balm, and the doctors used it, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, let's see. I've got that. I got that. All right, this map I think is going to come out okay, Michael. And I don't ask me why, but as I said, is everybody here, by the way?
Yes.
I'm here.
Okay. All right. But that anyway, that I sang that song in choirs way back when I started singing in the choir in the Methodist church when I was 11 years old, and sang till I was 18. When I went to college, I sang in the college choir and so on. So it's you know, I think a beautiful song. Doesn't have a lot to do with our Bible study, but anyway. Okay, so now we're back to. Oh, has anybody got anything to say? Did I run? How many left during that?
Oh, we're here.
Okay. So Gilead looks like a good place for Elijah to grow up. It's real hilly. It's rugged, and so on. So we're back to Elijah here. And here's the whole of verse 1. Now Elijah the Tishbite, who was the settlers of Gilead, said to Ahab, "Hey, guess what, Ahab? You're done." Yeah, John, you're done with rain. It's not even going to do. Dew's not even coming up for the, you know, to water the grass. You're done until I tell you it's going to rain. Now he had God's backing on this, obviously. And so that's what happens. That's exactly what happens. And the first words that we read out of Elijah's mouth was a curse or a miracle, whichever way you want to look at it. There will be no dew or rain until Elijah says there would. And just as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. God sent him to a place where he would have water and food. Now, think of Ahab. Number one, this guy comes in and he says, "Hey, it ain't going to rain anymore till I say it's going to rain." And Ahab's initial reaction, you know, human reaction would be, "Yeah, right. Sure. I don't even know who you are. Never saw you before." And but after a week, after a month, after 6 months, Ahab is going, "Who was that guy?" And so he's looking for him. And we can see from other scriptures that he does. He looks for him for 3 years. And as suddenly as he appeared, he left. And God sent him to a place where he would have water and food. And so Ahab couldn't even ask him about it. "Hey, whoa. Is there anything we can do? Can we fast? Can we, you know, be in sackcloth and ashes? What do we need to do to get the rain back?" Nope, he's gone. There, that one came out a little bit better. Every time I moved my mouse.
Well, hey, since you had it up, go back one slide, Skip. Verse 4 is disconcerting. He's serving God. He's like, "Okay, go hide by the stream or the brook. And I've commanded the ravens to provide for you." I don't know about you, but the idea of, you know, I don't know if people know what ravens are. I've seen them in India, and they're mean birds. And they go through garbage, and they peck through carrion and all kinds of things. So the idea of being fed by ravens is disconcerting. I guess that means, as that details how comfy I am in the prosperity enjoyed.
I'm glad you brought that up, Michael. That's awesome. We have ravens that we have some interaction with. And the way this happens is that we have a real gopher problem on our property. And Jill and I have learned how to trap the gophers. We also, once you trap a gopher a number of years ago, we thought, well, what am I going to do with this? And so we just kind of tossed it on the side, thinking that over the night, the coyotes would come by and pick it up. Well, lo and behold, we found out that if we put this gopher that we caught in the middle of the day out by the side of the road, after a little while, some ravens would fly by and one would sail down gracefully, because they are very gracefully sail down to land next to the gopher, and then they typically hop up and down, and they are big enough to grab, how much you think those gophers weigh? 5 or 6 ounces or something like that. And they were big enough to pick up this gopher, and some of the heavier gophers, they could barely get started, and they would sail off down into the pastures. So Michael's absolutely right. They eat dead things. And so you know this. Yeah, but we fortunately feed the ravens. They don't bring us food.
Yeah, in India, I saw a raven come and take a whole chicken leg and just fly off with it. And they're smart birds too. They're not mindless. They're very intelligent. They're very aware. But I don't know. The idea of being fed by birds bringing me food is just I don't know. God's using something that's technically unclean to feed one of His servants. I suppose we could get into a huge discussion about that, but the idea, I guess for me, I just wanted to share the revulsion of being fed by something like ravens. I guess for most folks that may not know what ravens are, it'd be kind of the equivalent of being fed by buzzards. Kind of a wild thing. Anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. One of the commentaries was talking about how ravens are mean, and that it was interesting that God chose ravens to feed Elijah, and he was there by this brook too, which seems to be a private place for him, to get water. So this is, I guess, the second miracle. The first one would be, that God's not going to let it rain, and the second one is Elijah's able to have drink and be fed. We assume clean food. At least I'm going to go that route. By the ravens, and then it goes on in verse. Oh, okay, I was going to show you this. Here is Tishbe. Finally, we have a good map. Okay, here's Tishbe. Here's Samaria, called, it looks like Samana, but that's Samaria right here. Now remember, there's a city and a country named Samaria, and we're dealing with the city where Omri built the palace, and it was on a hill about 300 feet high, so that it was well defended. So here's Tishbe. This is Gilead. And here's this brook. This is where Elijah was. Okay.
Wait, Gene had I think Gene had a comment a minute ago.
Okay, Gene.
Okay, maybe.
It was just I was kind of gonna joke around. After mentioning Gilead and then ravens, I just wanted to thank you, Skip. Now I know what that reference is in that poem.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so the brook dries up. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he would drink from the brook. Well, it happened that the brook dried up. Why? Well, because it wasn't raining anywhere. So then Yahweh sent, the word of Yahweh came to him and said, okay, I want you to go to Zarephath. You see that arrow going way up north of Phoenicia, or part of Phoenicia, I guess, right next to Sidon. You remember, Mark, wasn't it you talking about Sidon last week or week before last? Anyway, so he goes up to Zarephath, and I think we're all familiar with God sent him to a widow up there.
But this was not in the land governed by Israel. This is a pagan nation ruled by Sidon.
Yeah, and that's what you were talking about a week ago or 2 weeks. Was it one of Solomon's wives that brought that up? I don't remember. Well, anyway, okay. So verse 8, the word of Yahweh came to him and said, I want you to go now. I want you to go up to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, which Mark just said. It's not part of Israel. It's a purely pagan land. He said, I want you to stay there because I've told a widow there to provide for you. Now, what's interesting about this is the widow doesn't have anything to provide him. So here's another miracle. 2 people were saved alive because God had sent him there. Now, when I say 2, I'm talking about the widow and her son, which we'll talk about in a minute. So he went up there to Zarephath. Verse 10. So he rose and he went up there, and when he got to the gate of the city, there was a widow there gathering sticks. And he called to her and he says, would you go get me a little water that I may drink? Now, I think this is interesting because there wasn't much water. And this woman must have had some kind of faith that she was able to make herself, if you will, go get him some water. And as she was going to get it, he said, oh, by the way, bring me some food too. And she said, Mister, I don't have any food. I've got a little bit of flour in a bowl and a little bit of oil in the jar that I can make bread out of. But I'm down here gathering a few sticks so I can start a fire for me and my son that we may eat it and die. Because that's it. We got this little bit of flour, little bit of oil, and I'm going to start a fire. We're going to eat, quote, the Last Supper, unquote. Little metaphorical humor there. And then Elijah said, hey, look, don't be afraid. Go do what you were going to do, but make me a little bread cake from it first and bring it to me. Now, would that be scary?
I think there's something interesting here in the sense of back in verse 12. Notice what she said. As Yahweh, your Elohim, lives. She's acknowledging that that his God is Yahweh. And remember, she lives in Sidon governed area, what was their god? Milcom, the god of the Sidonians.
Yeah.
And she is aware and acknowledging that Elijah, how she recognized him, maybe by his clothing or whatever else he said, but that his God was Yahweh,
That's it.
whose land was Israel, Judah.
Yeah, I missed that.
And this whole thing with her, Elijah's saying, go, don't fear, do as you've said, but make me a little bread from it first and bring it out to me. And so the whole thing's set up to show her stepping out on faith in acknowledging Yahweh. I think.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I missed that where it says, as Yahweh your Elohim lives. But the other thing is down here in verse 13, he says, make me a little bread first. Well, she probably only had enough flour to make one piece of bread. But she had faith. Now, we don't know why. We don't know if she worshiped Yahweh. I don't, God, I don't see anything that says that she did, but she had faith and made him some bread. And then afterward, you may make one for yourself. And, so what is she thinking? I'm not going to be able to make any for myself. I'm going to have to use all of it for you. And then he says, and this is in the same conversation, thus says Yahweh Elohim of Israel, the bowl of flour shall not be exalted. You're not going to run out of flour. Nor shall the jar of oil be empty, because you can't make the bread without olive oil or oil until the day that Yahweh sends rain on the face of the earth. So he's telling her right there, and she believed him. Don't worry. Go make the flour. Go make the bread. You're not going to run out. And verse 16 is another miracle. The bowl of flour was not exhausted, nor did the jar of oil become empty, according to the word of Yahweh, which he spoke through Elijah. All right, let's see. Okay, then here's another miracle coming up. And the woman got kind of nasty with him. It was kind of interesting. And it may just be the way that the writers phrased this, but it came about after these things that the son of the woman became sick. And he was very, very sick. And it says there was no breath left in him. I'm assuming from that he died. So she said to Elijah, I'm not going to have anything to do with you. You've come to bring my iniquity to remembrance and put my son to death. And he said, give me your son. And he took her and went upstairs and laid him on his own bed. And he called to Yahweh and said, oh, Yahweh, my Elohim, have you also brought calamity to the widow with whom I'm staying by causing her son to die? Now, this is a theme that we're going to hear a little bit later when Elijah's saying, I've done everything you told me to do, and Jezebel is seeking my life. And he's kind of saying the same thing to God here. He says, what'd you do? You brought me calamity to the widow to make me look bad? What's going on here? Anyway, that's my interpretation. Then he stretched himself on the child 3 times and called. But anyway, so God raised him from the dead. And Elijah took the child and brought him down from the upper room, and he was not sick anymore. He was in perfect health. And Elijah said, see, your son's alive. And the woman who had bits of faith as we've gone through this, after this, and who wouldn't, God get their attention here. She said, now I know that you're a man of Elohim, of the Most High God, and that the word of Yahweh in your mouth is truth. I know whatever you say is going to happen. I believe you. And so God sends Elijah to Ahab to announce that it's going to rain. Y'all, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Now, word of warning. Usually when I sneeze 3 times, so just be ready. So now it happened after many days. And in Kings, it doesn't tell us how many days that is, but we do have 2 other sources and I've got those here in just a second. But it happened after many days that the word of Yahweh came to Elijah in the 3rd year. Okay, well, there you are, 3rd year. Saying, go show yourself to Ahab, and I'll send rain on the face of the earth. So it says, Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, and he prayed earnestly that it would not rain. And it didn't rain for 3 years and 6 months. This is from James. Then he prayed again, and the sky poured rain, and the earth produced its fruit. And then we have in Luke, he says, but I say to you in truth, verse 20 is, where is that? O Lord my God, have you also brought calamity to the widow with whom I'm staying and causing? Is that the verse you're talking about? I just had a chat. I didn't see who it was from.
Yeah, that I just thought it was interesting that when he prayed, he basically said the same thing that the woman had said to him about God. You know, in other words, he said, God, you've brought calamity on this woman. Yeah. I just thought it was interesting that he started with that.
Yeah, it is. All right, so I'm not exactly sure what James is saying. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours. I'm not sure that my nature is like Elijah. But anyway, it said that he prayed earnestly that it would not rain. Elijah really prayed hard that it wouldn't rain, and it didn't rain for 3.5 years. Then he prayed again, and it did rain. And in Luke, it says basically the same thing. There were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah. And this is something that Stephen said that helped get him killed, if you all remember. He said, God didn't send Elijah to any woman any Jewish woman, any Israelite woman. He sent him to a pagan. Now that's in, I don't know, Acts 6 or 8, wherever it's talking, where Stephen is giving him his speech. And I'm pretty sure that's right, that he said, I think this is the example. God didn't even send Elijah to a Jew. You think the Jews are so great? How come God didn't send Elijah to a Jew? Anyway, says there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah when the sky was shut up for 3.5 years, when a great famine came over all the land. You can imagine if it didn't rain in your area for 3.5 years. Of course, I don't know, California may know some of that in parts of California. I mean, Colorado. So then we come to we're already up to the 2nd verse of 1 Kings. We covered the first one, took 30 minutes, and now we're up to verse 2. So Elijah went to show himself to Ahab, and it says, now the famine was severe in Samaria. Why did he mention that? Why did he mention it was severe in Samaria? Wasn't it severe somewhere else? Well, Samaria was where Ahab's palace was. It's where Ahab's throne was. And I can't help but wonder if the famine was more severe around Ahab than it was elsewhere. Doesn't say that. I don't know. But I also don't know why it's mentioned that the famine was worse where Ahab was. There, that's a decent map. Okay. Ahab is ruling right here. Now I know you can't read this, but here's Samaria. Here's where Ahab is reigning, and Elijah's up here. So Elijah is obviously walking down. Oh, I did it again. Elijah is walking down from this area to get to Samaria to see Ahab. I can't. Okay. 1 Kings 18:1. Now it happened after many days that the word of Yahweh came to Elijah in the 3rd year and said, "Go show yourself to Ahab, and I'll give him some more rain." So Elijah went to show himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria. I've already read that part, but here's verse 3. Well, shoot. Sorry. One of the things I didn't turn off was my phone. I should have done that. But anyway. And by the way, that was a guy calling me about our feast location in Hot Springs. So I'm going to need to take it when we finish. Go show yourself to Ahab, and I'll send rain on the face of the earth. So he went to show himself to Ahab. And Ahab called Obadiah. Now, this is not the one that wrote the book. This is the guy, he was a governor. He worked for Ahab. But he was a believer. And that's pretty rare in the north that you have a believer. He feared Yahweh greatly. He had respect. He worshiped him. For when Jezebel destroyed the prophets of Yahweh, and I don't know if we've skipped over that or if we'll get it. No, we hadn't gotten it yet. Obadiah took 100 of them and hid them in a couple of caves and provided them with bread and water. So now, put yourself in Obadiah's place.
In one fell swoop, we have more prophets mentioned than you can find names of prophets in the whole Bible.
That's a good point. That's right. Yeah.
Way more than 100, because that's how many he saved. We don't know how many he killed.
Yeah, I was looking, and it's not in here. I think, I don't know, the 400, kind of sticks out to me, but there were 450 prophets of Baal, and that may be where. But you're right. We have no idea who these guys were. But Obadiah was helping them. Now, it doesn't say God told Obadiah to do this. He was washing feet, Michael. He was serving these prophets, and he hid them. How do you hide 100 prophets without anybody seeing it? That's kind of amazing. He was a faithful follower of Yahweh. So it says in verse 5 here, then Ahab, said to Obadiah, I want you to go everywhere. Go wherever there's water, to all the valleys, and maybe we'll find some grass and keep the horses and mules alive and not have to kill some of the cattle. This has obviously been going on during the 3.5 years. And so they divided the land between them to check it out. And so now, they divided the land between them to survey it. Ahab went one way and Obadiah went another way. Now, as Obadiah was on the way, he met Elijah and he recognized him. And he fell on his face and said, is this you, Elijah, my master? It seems to show that Obadiah was familiar with Elijah. When Elijah went to tell Ahab it wasn't going to rain, it's logical to think that the governor of Samaria, Ahab's Secretary of State, would have been there. So he recognized Ahab. Now, as Obadiah was on the way, behold, Elijah met him, and he recognized him, and he fell on his face and says, is this you, Elijah, my master? And the next verse, I'm going to just read a verse or two and stop and talk about something. But he said to him, yeah, it's me. Go say to your master, behold, Elijah is here. And Obadiah goes, "You're kidding me. No, that's not happening." He said, what have I done wrong that you're giving me a sentence of death? Because when I go tell Ahab I've seen you, I'm done. And so Obadiah says the same thing that Mark mentioned about telling the widow. As Yahweh your Elohim lives, there's nowhere that Ahab has not sent someone to search for you. And when they came back and said he's not here, he made a kingdom or nation swear that they could not find you. And now you're telling me, go tell Ahab, behold, Elijah is here. Well, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to tell Ahab, yeah, Elijah's here, and he's going to go to talk to you, but the Spirit of God's going to carry him away. And Ahab's not going to find you, and he's going to kill me. He's pretty scared here. It'd be like being sent to tell Hitler something, or whoever. That's a good enough example right there. And if it's not a happy message for Hitler or for Ahab in this case, he's going to kill me, even though I have feared Yahweh from my youth. I've been a faithful follower. Now that is interesting, that in the castle, Ahab's number one guy has been worshiping Yahweh since he's a kid. And somehow he's survived. Has it not been told to my master what I did when Jezebel killed the prophets of the Lord, that I hit 100 prophets by 50s, which tells me there were 2 caves, in a cave, and provided them with bread and water? Haven't you heard that? I'm one of the good guys, Elijah. You're going to get me killed. And now you're telling me, go tell Ahab Elijah is here? I'm a dead man. I'm a walking dead man. And Elijah said, no, I don't know if swear is the right word, but I'm going to use it. I swear I'll be here. I'm not going to disappear. I need to talk to him. So I'm sticking around. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. Now, this seems to show, well, okay, I've already said that. I lost my place, sorry. 16, okay. So the next verse shows the pride and the arrogance of Ahab. Hang on, I need to check on something. Okay. Shows the pride and arrogance of Ahab. It couldn't be that he's disobeyed God. Well, I didn't do anything wrong. I don't know why this guy came in and said we weren't going to have any rain. Certainly not my fault. But he got the entire country into a world of trouble. No, not Ahab, not him. Verse 17. As my clicker quit. Verse 17, when Ahab saw Elijah, and this is one of the funniest verses in the Bible when you think about it. Ahab said, is this you? You're the one that's causing all this trouble? And Elijah said, not me. I haven't troubled Israel, but you and your father's house have, going back, 7 generations now? Because you've forsaken the commandments of Yahweh and you followed the Baals. You're following all these Elohim, you're following all these fake gods. Now, send and gather to me all Israel to Mount Carmel. Now, it's probably a little hyperbole, but anyway, I want you to bring 400 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of the Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. Now, that tells us that Jezebel's taking care of these. Jezebel's worshiping these guys. So there's 850 false prophets that Elijah told Ahab to bring to Mount Carmel. Now, in the complete biblical library commentary, it said Elijah was in a position to dictate, and dictate he did. Let all Israel be summoned to Mount Carmel. And there he would singly meet in their presence the 400 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of the Asherah, all of whom ate at Jezebel's table, meaning that she was supporting their expenses. Now, I've quit there because the next thing we're going to talk about all of the things that happened at Mount Carmel with the sacrifice and Elijah pouring water all over his wood. I know a lot of you all have camped. Have you ever tried doing that? Have you ever tried watering down your wood real good before you try to light it? Ain't gonna happen. You're not lighting anything. So, you all are all familiar with that, but that's where we're going to start. I say that's where we're going to start next time. Who knows where I'm going? I may review some stuff, but I've barely started on next week's session. But I had a lot of fun doing this one. I hope y'all didn't mind my song and my poem, but not my poem or my song, but you get it. Okay, so thoughts, comments?
What would be an interesting investigation? And maybe, I'm not asking you to do this, but it would be interesting, even for discussion, is, I've read many times the whole spirit of Jezebel. Do we know and understand a little bit more about the worship systems that Jezebel was involved in establishing there in Israel? Because I've heard it mentioned quite a bit about the spirit of Jezebel. I mean, were these temples to Baal, were they like the sex temples in Athens? Were these were there infant sacrifices like they were to Molech? I guess it might be a little bit helpful to get a little bit of an understanding of Jezebel herself and what she was giving the nation over to, and why everyone followed her, and why she had so many of these prophets. Unless I missed it and it didn't register in my mind, you may have mentioned it, but that's just a thought that popped in my head there as far as trying to understand Jezebel, because even in our modern age, it has a very negative connotation to it that's lived down through the ages. And so maybe a little bit of a review, or maybe if there's historical documentation of what was actually involved with everything that she was doing.
Yeah, I can do that. We did mention hang on, Jim, just a half a smidgen about that back when it says that Ahab married Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbel I can't remember if it was Ammon or who, but she came from one of those horrible human sacrifice areas. And yes, I think you can make a case that there was human sacrifice in the northern tribes, and I'll try to dig some of that out. That's a good idea, Michael. Jim?
Yeah, verse 18 is interesting because you have followed the Baals, plural.
Yeah.
So apparently Baal had more than one false god called a Baal.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when it was talking about Jezebel coming from that nation, and I'll go back and try to find that. it actually says Baal dash, and it names another god. And one of the commentaries that I read talked about that being one of the worst of the worst. And I think that may be where it's talking about the human sacrifice. If you remember,
That's interesting stuff.
yeah, if you remember, I think it was last week where all of a sudden the writer of Kings threw in the rebuilding of Jericho and mentioned that his firstborn was put in the foundation and his secondborn was put at the gates. That was human sacrifice. Well, if Ahab and Jezebel and them, if they weren't having human sacrifice, why would he have mentioned that? Why bring it up? Now that doesn't prove anything, but I think there will be some evidence that, and going back to the poem that Milton wrote, he mentions that. That there was human sacrifice. I forgot exactly the way that he phrased it. So yeah, Michael, I'll see what I can find, and anybody else is certainly welcome to talk about, to do research and find. That'll be everybody's assignment. Find out what you can about Jezebel and before, where she came from, what they did, who they worshipped, who her dad was, Ethbel, whoever, which is kind of an interesting name, isn't it? Ethbel. So anyway, yeah, that sounds like fun. That'll send me on another.
Buggy. Well, it's not a hole. It's related to this, so you're not chasing monkeys or rabbits here. And the reason I ask is, again, because I've heard a lot talking about the spirit of Jezebel plaguing the nation, and I can't help but when you look at, especially if human sacrifice was involved, and you look at a modern context, at least I try to look at everything in a how do these scriptures apply to us today? What can we learn from them? It ties into what you talked about earlier about the female influence on the male mind. And these were the ladies behind this, or not ladies, but women behind the scenes that were influencing, the negative turn that Israel took. In my lifetime, I look at the women's lib movement, which was conjoined with the pro-abortion movement in this country, and that has influenced the entire patriarchy of politics in the United States, to the point that they call it now the third rail of politics, that you don't dare even discuss the possibility of infringing or restricting or limiting our ability to kill children in the womb whenever we feel like it, so we could have sex without consequences. And so I look at that, and I'm looking at, wondering aloud in my mind if God looks at all this, and if this is not also the spirit of Jezebel in a way, and it kind of fits with what you talked about as far as the female influence on a society when it takes a turn towards despotism and tyranny.
Yeah, and then in what is it, Revelation chapter 3 or 4, where it talks about I have somewhat against you because you admitted Jezebel, or the attitude of Jezebel, spirit of Jezebel.
Yeah, that's what prompted my request.
Oops, I see some chats. Did I miss some stuff here? Well, the song went over with some of you. Good. Yeah, Barb said it was interesting that Obadiah was able to feed and water the 100 prophets for 3.5 years. Yeah, or however, we don't know how, at what point that he took them in there, but yeah, you're exactly right, Barb. A few years back, we heard reference to Mother Earth. Yeah, Gaia, however you pronounced it. Hey, Mark, you and Jill have fun down there and be careful. Come back safely.
Thanks. Have a great Sabbath.
Yeah, y'all too.
Guys too.
But anyway, I really did have a good time today. putting this thing together. And I'm started on number 7. You know, we get a page or a paragraph about all of these kings, and then Ahab comes along, and we get like 14 chapters of talk about Ahab and all the bad stuff that he was doing.
You know, it's a shame we don't have that book that chronicles of all the kings that has been mentioned several times.
Yeah,
because that may be a real interesting read. But you know, there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, what's happening now with corrupt rulers and corrupt nations? Really, it's the same spirit and thing that plagued God's people way back then. Nothing new under the sun.
true. That's definitely true. So that's all I've got. But I'm certainly willing to sit here and talk about this stuff or other stuff. You know, it's supposed to be a study of the prophets, but up to this point, you know, about 90% of our study has been about, you know, the history of Israel. But I didn't know how to get to the prophets without talking about that. So,
Well, yeah, you have to, because why were the prophets sent to begin with? I think that history is vitally important to understand, because there's a purpose and a reason the prophets were sent.
yeah, I don't want one knocking on my door. I can assure you. You know, hi, Skip. I'm a prophet. God has sent me to you. No, I'm not. I'm not interested.
That's a scary thought for sure. Skip, let me share something with the group. When Michael suggested that it would be an interesting study, I grabbed a device and did a quick Google search on Jezebel and, you know, how she worshipped. And there's an interesting article, but I found the flavor of it particularly interesting. It said, perhaps Jezebel optimistically believes that she can encourage religious tolerance and give legitimacy to the worship habits of those Baalites who already reside in Israel. Perhaps Jezebel sees herself as an ambassador who could help unite the two lands and bring about cultural pluralism, regional peace, and economic prosperity. I thought you guys would enjoy that.
I do. Yeah. If Skip gets into talking a little bit more about her, can you reserve that note and bring that back up if we talk about it again? Because that's very intriguing, Susan. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, Susan, you know, if the author was being a little sarcastic when he was saying that.
I am not convinced the author was sarcastic at this point, but I was going to look at it a little bit closer.
Yeah, that sounded more based on what I've read about Jezebel. You know, of course, I'm quite sure she wanted the whole nation to come under her and her hubby's rule. You know, that's
the point, Skip. The way they do it is, well, we want tolerance for the minorities, and then the tolerance, and then it transforms itself into, we're going to put down the majority, and then you're going to have intolerance towards anybody but you know, what it is they want, you know, the wokeness or the Baals or whatever it is that they're going to push. So that mechanism is very interesting. That's why I kind of climbed onto that, because maybe that fits into this whole spirit of Jezebel comment that you read about, you mentioned in Revelation, that we probably, that's nothing new under the sun. It still exists today. So thanks. I appreciate that.
By the way, those of you who were here Wednesday have already heard from him a little bit, but we have a new member, James Fire, who I met on Wednesday morning at a little coffee group that Mike James has started. And so welcome, James. I hope you enjoyed today's study. I know I did. All right, and Tom Davis just left. Tom's pretty much joined us. Oh, James is unable to talk. I'm in a crowded place. I did enjoy the study. Good. Yeah, Tom Davis left. He enjoyed it. Tom's really getting into these. This is the, I don't know, third or fourth Sabbath that he's joined us, and he joins us every Wednesday night too. He's one of my Wednesday morning Bible study buddies, and James Fire is also one of the people on our Wednesday morning coffee group that's after the Bible study that I go to. So anyway, anybody else? Okay, Jim Williams, your mic's on.
Sorry, Skip. I didn't mean for it to be on.
How's your sandwich?
You could hear me chewing, huh?
That's the one thing. When I tell people that our Bible studies, last like 2 hours, they look at me kind of funny, and I said, "Well, no, wait a minute. Remember, everybody's at home. They can leave, go to the bathroom. They can go get a cup of coffee, make them a sandwich. It's not like sitting in church in a pew for 2 hours." And that's the thing.
You're coming back with leftover spaghetti, actually.
Well, you know what we did, or not we. I'm going to turn off recording here. Hang on.